Oh, we gonna code today. Like some more exciting coding than we've been doing so far. You're gonna actually see things spit out. Should be more exciting. So if you haven't already, make sure that you watch the previous video where we... So if you don't remember from the previous video, we talked about how coding is made up of a program remembering values or things, and we call that creating a variable, which we talked about in our last video. And we have the taking logical actions on those values portion of the program, right? That's what this video is all about today. So when we want the computer program to take action or take a logical action on a value that we've stored, let's say like on the days of uptime that we talked about last time, which we discussed was a float because it's a decimal in our case. It could not be a float, it depends on how you program it. So this is the portion that is going to get more complicated and going to take more practice, right? What you need to know is that languages typically have some built-in logic or actions you can take, and then you also can code your own logic and actions that you can take. And there's other things to consider too that we get into in other videos. I'm going to give you an example of each of those, a built-in logical action that you can take in your program and how you can create one, because we talked about how programming languages have a grammar or syntax. And so even though there's many different things you can do with your logical action, they generally follow a certain grammar in order to run. So these logical actions we're talking about are called functions. At least in Python and other programming languages, they could be called something like methods. It doesn't matter, it's all a different language's way of saying how you create logical actions. And I gotta make this video quick because I'm running out of daylight. Truthfully, even though I like to do a bit of an intro for each video, I think this is best explained if we just dive right into the code so I can show you exactly what I'm talking about as I'm talking. So I have my developer environment or IDE up again, and you can see that we still have the file up that we used in the last video, and it's still untitled because I never saved it and named it anything. And I'm still not gonna do that yet because I'll teach you nitpicky things later. So we are going to create a new file again. So I'm gonna go on a Mac, File, New File, choose a Python file, and here we go again. So if you really want to know all of the functions or logical actions that are built into a language like Python, that typically comes with a little bit of study and practice, although there are some common ones you're going to use all the time. And because we are doing our really fun exposing introductory videos in this course, I'm going to introduce you to a function that you're going to use quite frequently, and it's called a print statement or a print function. And it looks like this. I say the name of the function, and then I put 2 parentheses. That's it. And I'm gonna go ahead and show you what this function does before I kind of explain behind the scenes why this matters and what's going on. So a print function is how you make something spit out in the terminal when you run your script. So I could say like, Erica is such a great teacher, ha ha ha. I'm gonna save the file in order to run it, and I'm just gonna name it practice because I'm lazy. Then we have 2 ways to run this file, right? We can either hit the play button up here at the top right, which I think is a little more convenient, or we can run the command python3 and then the name of the file, which in this case is practice.py. Oh, and you can see I can't tab over because I'm not in the right directory, so you gotta make sure of that too. And apparently for some stupid reason I saved this in downloads. All right, so now we're in downloads, let's try that again. Python3 practice. Now we can see that when we tab, it actually completes. Oh, daggone it. Sorry, typo. There we go, and you can see the print statement. Yay! Erica is such a great teacher, ha ha ha. So this is something that you're gonna use all the time because it's useful, especially when you're learning to code. And what you'll notice is that you didn't really have to think through or code any logic per se when taking this action because it was already built into the language, right? All you had to do was call the function. So that is how coding works when it comes to these logical actions. First, you or somebody else, in this case, the people who make and maintain Python, are going to write out exactly what the function is doing. So somebody at some point in time took the time to write out line by line how to make something print to the terminal. Then you call the function. So calling the function is what we just did, where you make the name of the function, or where you write the name of the function, 2 parentheses that may or may not have something in between them, it just depends. And that's it. So that's our built-in function example. There's many others. You can look at that on your own time. That's what you can use an AI coding assistant for too. So let's talk about writing our own functions, because we will rely a lot on built-in functions on other services that we'll talk about later. But the bread and butter is that you know how to make your own. Okay, so the example I'm giving you is something that I'm not really sure why you would do this as a network engineer. It's not really an amazing example, but I'm giving you something that you probably wouldn't necessarily do because I don't want to overcomplicate things. When you're just learning, you need to truly learn, and there'll be plenty of time to do cool things. So I really don't want to risk exposing you to things that are just gonna, muddy the waters of your learning. Let's pretend that for some reason you have two switches. We'll call one switch 1. We're making a variable here like we learned about in the last video. And we'll say, switch 1 is uptime. And we'll say 65.4. You can tell me what your switch's uptime is if you're working with them. And let's do switch 2. And let's do switch 2 days uptime. And let's say that's 13.3. Okay, so now we have two things that the program is remembering, right? We've got two variables, switch 1 and switch 2's uptime. Now let's write our function where we're going to add these two values together, because for some reason we want to know that. So here's where the grammar part or the syntax part comes in. First, you're going to write the keyword def. And it probably stands for definition. Again, you don't need to know the theory, but it's how you start a function in Python. And then we're going to say add days uptime. That seems like a pretty solid function name, right? It's descriptive of what's happening. So there's our function name, and then we're going to put a set of parentheses. Now this set of parentheses is here because if you remember all the way back to our Thinking Like a Developer video, please watch that if you did not. When we write notifications, when we write algorithms or functions or whatever you want to call it, we can have inputs and we can have outputs. So if a function is supposed to use a certain input, whether it is something that you are already remembering as part of the program, or whether it's something that you're asking for the user or collecting as part of a web form or whatever, that will go here in between the parentheses. And now all you're doing when you put something in between the parentheses is indicating that value needs to be defined. You're not putting the actual value there. And what I mean is that you're not going to put between these two parentheses 65.4 plus 13.3. Why is that? Because encoding values constantly change. That is why we use variables, because you can continue to refer to the name of something you want to remember, but the value of that thing can change, right? Days of uptime is going to change every day or throughout the day, however you are coding it. And you'll get better at naming all of these things, right? Variables, functions, the things in between the parentheses, they're called parameters. But that's not that important right now, right? So let's just say uptime 1 and uptime 2 are the two things that need to be passed in when running this function. And then we're going to enter, and then we're going to hit colon, and that signals the end of that first line of the function. Again, you don't need to care why, that's just how it is in Python. Then when we tab and hit enter, you'll notice that my developer environment automatically tabbed in that line. That is one of the great features of using a developer environment, is not having to think about all the stupid ways that needs to be spaced out, because it matters. Your code cannot run because of a missing or extra space, and that's real annoying. So now anyway, you've already said, hey, two values should be coming into this function or being used by this function. We don't know what those values are going to be at this point in time, right? Again, I've created variables, places in memory in our code that say this already, but all right, so basically what this function is supposed to be doing is adding these two numbers, right? And so that's what we want to have happen in this next line of code. And again, I'm not trying to overwhelm you with too much of what things are called officially in Python, because that's just going to be more things to remember. You can get slick on that later. But just know that you can directly add things by using the plus sign. So uptime 1 plus uptime 2. The final thing we'll do is indicate what the output should be, right? Because we talked about how there's a result or something that comes out of a function. And this could be the end result or thing you're looking for. Maybe this whole script or code that you wrote was literally just to calculate days of uptime, and then boom, you've got it. But what's more realistic when you're coding is that you're going to do something with a function, it's going to give you a result, and then you're going to continue to use that result somewhere else in your code. And so that's why we want to officially output something by using the return keyword. It's called a return statement. So you can see it turned purple. We're going to say return, and then what do we return? We want to return the result of uptime 1 plus uptime 2, but how do we do that? Well, remember when I said that a computer program does not remember anything by itself? A computer program is dumb. You're the one telling it exactly what to remember and what to do. Well, it is adding uptime 1 and uptime 2 for you just like you ask, but you're not remembering it anywhere. It is not stored anywhere, that result. So what we're going to do is go back up to line 8. You can see over here on the left that we can see our line numbers. And if we go back to line 8, we can write a variable name. And this is a crappy name, but we're just going to put results just to make it easy. Okay, so now we are remembering that value, right? Result refers to the value of uptime 1 plus uptime 2. And you notice how it's like this weird gray or light blue color? That's because I've created this value, but I'm not actually using it anywhere in my code. So when we put return result, boom, you see how it turns to that same like light blue, white-ish color as uptime 1 and uptime 2? It's because it's being used. And yes, just like you can use the plus sign in Python, you can also use like a minus sign. You can multiply, divide. These things are called operators if you decide that you want to Google this and learn them. But that's really not important that you know that at this stage in the game, right? We are learning to think like developers or coders right now, and having these things memorized is not that important. So I've just saved this file because I want to run it, and let's see what happens when I run this file. We're going to go down to the terminal, and we see Erica is such a great teacher, ha ha ha. Okay, so we don't see the result of that function. Why don't we put a print statement, one of those built-in print statements in here, and let's print the result, right? Let's see it come out in the terminal so that we can see the result of all our work. And let's run it again. It still just says Erica is such a great teacher, ha ha ha. Why is that? Because, like I mentioned earlier in the video, you have to do two different things when writing your own functions or logical actions. The first is indicate what that function is supposed to be doing, how the crap it comes up with the result that it's supposed to come up with. The second thing you have to do is actually call on that function, right? Because the program only does exactly what you tell it to do. It is dumb. You're the smart one here. So yes, it has the instructions for what to do if you are interested in running this code, but you have to call on that code to let the program know that you want it to run. Now, when I call on this function, I'm still going to leave the print statement in there. Why? Because when we run code, a lot of times you don't see the output. It's not something that's visible, and I want you to see it. So I want you to see the result in the terminal. So let's call on that function. You can see that it auto-populates. Your developer environment auto-populates, and that's really useful when you're doing more complicated coding. I'm going to tab because it already guessed what I wanted. I'm going to put those two parentheses. Now I have to put something in between those two parentheses because that's what I indicated up here. It is expecting two values. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the value of uptime 1 to our switch 1 days uptime variable, not the exact number, but the variable, because again, the exact number can change. And I'm going to do the same thing with uptime 2. So uptime 1 equals switch 1 days uptime. I'm just tabbing to complete that, comma, uptime 2 equals switch 2 days uptime. I hit enter. All right, so now we have the function explained for the computer, and we're actually calling on it and saying, hey, run this and give us the result. And in this case, we're going to see that result because we're printing it out. So let's hit run again, and there we go. This time we get two functions. We get the Erica is such a great teacher, ha ha ha, because we are calling on the print statement. Python, the language, has already wrote it out for us, and we're just calling it. And we get the add days uptime results, which is 78.7 days uptime apparently. This is a lot of new information to take in, and so I'm actually going to stop this video in a few minutes and do a part 2 for functions to make sure you're not overwhelmed. And in between, I really want you to do your practice exercises linked in the description here. But just to review one more time, functions are the logical actions that we are taking in our code. And some of those logical actions are already built into your language. Things that are common tasks are going to be built in, like printing to the terminal. In that case, you just call on it by putting the name and parentheses, and then maybe anything it needs in between, whatever's required. We also have the logical actions or functions that we create ourselves. And when we describe that by starting with a def, that's that little like flag keyword, hey, we're about to write a function. You're gonna name the function and it has the same rules as with a variable. There can't be any spaces. We usually keep it lowercase and underscored in Python. And then your parentheses. And in this case, we had values that we wanted the function to have to use in order to do its calculation. And so we put in two dummy stand-in holders, right? Saying, hey, there should be an uptime 1 and an uptime 2 in this. Then we added those two values and we stored that value or remembered it in this result variable. Finally, we print out the result so that we can see it for learning purposes. And then we return the result. And again, we cannot see that in this video, but we return it because let's say the next function is going to take that value and, I don't know, export it to an Excel spreadsheet. But remember, even with that print statement there, we didn't see anything until we actually called the function. In doing that required setting the values of those two dummy placeholder values in between the parentheses.